Okay, imagine this for a second. Your own hand, maybe your left hand, just starts doing things.
Doing things on its own.
Exactly. It reaches out, maybe grabs the TV remote when you didn't want it, or starts unbuttoning your shirt while your other hand is trying to button it up.
And it's not just a muscle spasm, right? It feels
Yeah.
like it wants to do it. Like there's another will behind it, an alien will.
That's it. Alien hand syndrome. It's this really bizarre, kind of unsettling neurological condition.
It really is. And what hits you immediately is this feeling people describe this profound loss of agency, you know? It's not just that your hand moved weirdly.
No.
It's the feeling that you didn't do it,
No.
that your own body isn't entirely yours to control anymore.
Yeah.
And the actions seem purposeful sometimes.
Yeah, purposeful and sometimes completely conflicting, like the buttoning and unbuttoning example. That's called intermanual conflict, isn't it?
That's the term, yeah. And in some really disturbing cases, the hand might even interfere with tasks or will even act aggressively towards the person themselves.
It really cuts deep into our basic feeling of being in control, of being a unified self.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the core question for this deep dive, doesn't it? How does our brain create that feeling of, I'm doing this?
Right. The sources describe AHS as these spontaneous controlled limb movements that the patient does not initiate.
Exactly. So our mission here is to explore that disconnect. We're going to look at what the science tells us about what goes wrong in the brain with AHS.
And what that breakdown reveals about how our sense of self-control normally works. Or maybe how it doesn't always work the way we assume.
Let's get into it then. So the core experience, we've touched on it, a limb, usually a hand, seems to have a mind of its own.
Operating independently. That feeling that I am not the source of the action.
Precisely. And the key thing our sources point to is damage. Damage to specific brain areas. This isn't usually psychiatric, it's neurological.
So it's about the brain's wiring getting disrupted. That normal flow from thinking about doing something to actually doing it to feeling like you did it, that chain gets broken somewhere.
That's a great way to put it. The integration of intention, execution, and that sense of agency, it falls apart.
Yeah.
And where it falls apart depends on the location of the brain lesion.
Okay, so there are different types based on where the damage is. Let's start with the callosal variant. What's going on there?
Right, the callosal variant. This one often involves damage to the corpus callosum.
That massive bundle of nerves connecting the left and right hemispheres of the brain. The main communication highway.
Exactly. So when that highway is damaged, the two sides of your brain can't coordinate properly. Intentions formed in one hemisphere might not get communicated effectively to the other.
Ah, so the non-dominant hand, often the left hand controlled by the right hemisphere, might just start doing something based on, say, what it sees.
Without the left hemisphere, which is often more involved in conscious planning and language, being fully aware or giving the okay.
Leading to that conflict we talked about. One hand trying to achieve a goal, the other, the alien one, seemingly working against it because the hemispheres aren't on the same page.
Precisely. The right hemisphere might initiate a grasp based on an environmental cue, while the left hemisphere has a totally different plan. That's the conflict.
Okay, that makes sense. Then there's the frontal variant. This one originates somewhere else.
Yes, the frontal variant is linked to damage in the frontal lobe, specifically areas like the supplementary motor area, the SMA, or the medial prefrontal cortex.
And how does that manifest? Is it different from the callosal type?
It often is, yeah. Here you might see more compulsive actions, like the hand just having to grasp objects nearby almost reflexively, and it's often the dominant hand in this variant.
The SMA, isn't that crucial for planning and initiating movements and sequencing them?
Got it. It's also really important for inhibiting unwanted actions. Think of the frontal lobes, particularly the SMA, as putting the brakes on movements you don't want to make.
So if that braking system is damaged,
The brakes are off, essentially. The hand might just reach out and grab things triggered by external stimuli, and the person finds it incredibly hard to inhibit that action or to let go, even when they consciously want to.
wow. Okay, so callosal is interhemisphere communication breakdown. Frontal is more about initiation and inhibition failure. What's the third main type? The parietal variant.
Right, the parietal or posterior variant. This involves damage to the parietal lobe, often on the non-dominant side, so the right side for most people.
And this one feels different to the person experiencing it.
Yes, often quite different. The movements might seem less complex or purposeful compared to the other variants, but what's often much stronger here is the feeling of disownership.
Disownership, you mean like, it really doesn't feel like their hand at all.
Exactly, a profound sense that the limb is foreign, alien in the truest sense of the word, not just acting without permission, but actually feeling like it doesn't belong to them.
And the parietal lobe is key for integrating senses, spatial awareness, our body map, our whole sense of where our body is and that it's ours.
Precisely. Damage there can really disrupt that body schema. The sources talk about a dissociation, a
Yeah.
split between the physical movement happening and the internal feeling of having willed it.
So the movement executes, but the brain doesn't flag it as mine.
That seems to be the core issue. It likely involves something called the efference copy, or corollary discharge mechanism.
Okay, break that down a bit. Efference copy.
So normally when your brain sends a command to move, say, your arm, it also sends a sort of internal memo, the efference copy, predicting what sensory feedback that movement should create.
Like predicting how it should feel to lift your arm.
Yeah, the feeling of the muscles moving, the change in joint position, all of it. This prediction is then compared to the actual sensory feedback coming in, if they match.
And the brain goes, yep, I did that. That was me. Contributing to that feeling of agency.
Exactly. But in AHS, particularly this parietal type, that system might be faulty. The prediction and the actual feedback don't match up correctly.
So the brain doesn't recognize the movement as self-generated. It feels alien.
That's the idea. The movement happens, but it lacks that internal tag of ownership.
Man, this condition just completely flips our everyday assumptions about controlling our bodies, doesn't it?
It really does. We just assume we're in charge. AHS shows that feeling of control is an active construction by the brain, and it can break down.
And it shows that complex, apparently goal-directed actions can happen without our conscious say-so.
Absolutely. It points away from a single CEO in the brain model towards something more distributed. Different areas handle different aspects of control, intention, awareness.
And damage in different spots leads to these different flavors of alien behavior.
Precisely. It forces us to rethink what self-control even means if parts of our brain can generate these complex actions completely outside our conscious will.
It suggests control is maybe less centralized, more of a negotiation between different brain systems than we typically imagine.
I think that's a really good way to look at it. AHS really underscores how intricate the neurological processes are that create our seamless feeling of being in charge. When those processes get disrupted, well, you get a hand with a mind of its own.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive then, the big takeaway seems to be that alien hand syndrome is this stark, almost unbelievable window into how our brains build our sense of agency.
Definitely. Disruptions in specific spots,
Mhm.
the callosum, the frontal lobes, the parietal lobes, they unravel that feeling of control in different ways, exposing the complex machinery underneath.
It shows the disconnect that can happen between our intention, our actions, and our feeling of ownership over those actions.
And it leaves us with a pretty challenging thought, doesn't it, for you listening? If this fundamental sense of controlling our own limbs can be so fragile, so dependent on specific neural circuits,
What does it really mean to be in control of ourselves?
right? What other parts of our subjective experience, our sense of self, are similarly constructed? How much of what feels inherently us is actually a product of complex, potentially fragile brain processes?
It definitely pushes you to think about consciousness, free will, the whole mind-body connection in a different light. AHS is rare, thankfully, but the questions it raises are fundamental.
Absolutely. Lots to ponder there about what makes us feel like us.